the quiet ranching town of Sage River, something happened that no one saw coming. A miracle, born in the most unlikely place. A sickly Mustang foal, barely clinging to life and turned away by everyone at the county auction, ended up in the weathered hands of Thomas Morgan, a man worn down by loss, with nothing left to lose. What began as a desperate act of compassion would change not only the fate of that dying foal and the rancher who saved her, but an entire town. Everyone told Tom to put her down. The experts said it was hopeless, but his stubborn heart refused to listen. And in the days that followed, not only did the foal, named Solace, begin to heal, but something extraordinary surfaced. She wasn't just any Mustang. She carried the bloodline of a legendary herd thought to be extinct for decades. Word spread fast, and her rare genetics, along with her uncanny ability to work cattle, brought unexpected attention. But with recognition came danger. Powerful people wanted her, and they were ready to take everything from Tom. What they didn't count on, though, was the strength of a broken community brought back together by a fragile little horse. Solace wouldn't just survive. She'd help heal a grieving family, expose a web of corruption, and spark a movement to protect hundreds of horses from slaughter. Before we dive deeper, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and if this story hits home for you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow, I've got something special waiting. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. The Sage River Livestock Auction was never a place for dreamers. The echo of boots on concrete, the stale scent of sawdust, the harsh fluorescent lights, everything about the place screamed business, not mercy. No one came here to save a life. Standing in the back of the crowd was Thomas Morgan, his hat pulled low, shadows covering the tired lines of his face. At 58, Tom still had the build of a lifelong rancher, but the years since Clara's death had carved deep into his posture and spirit. He hadn't planned to buy anything. He couldn't afford to. The bank was circling, and his mortgage on Sunrise Ranch was hanging by a thread. "Final lot," the auctioneer barked. "Mustang filly, 4 months, no papers, no vet check, respiratory issues, starting at $50. The gate creaked open, and the foal was dragged in, barely conscious, ribs like blades, her golden coat dull and patchy. Even from across the room, Tom could see the thick discharge from her nose, hear her strained breath. Then she looked up. Her deep brown eyes swept the crowd, and for a split second they locked with his. And something hit Tom like a punch to the chest, something he hadn't felt since the night Clara slipped away in his arms. "I'll take her," he said before his mind could argue. $200, the auctioneer shouted, more stunned than anyone. Silence fell over the room. From the front row, Frank Peterson, owner of the biggest breeding operation in 3 counties, whirled around in disbelief. "Morgan, have you lost your damn mind?" he sneered. "That thing won't live through the night." The auctioneer tried to drum up more bids, but Frank waved him off. "Ain't nobody else crazy enough. Let him waste his money." "Sold to Thomas Morgan for $200. The gavel came down. The room started to scatter. Tom's hand trembled as he paid. Money meant for feed, now gone. At the holding area, Dr. Sarah Wilkins stepped into his path. Her voice was calm but urgent. "Tom, she's got severe pneumonia. She needs immediate care, fast. This is going to cost you a lot more than what you paid." Tom met her gaze. "Can you help her?" Sarah paused, then nodded slowly. "I can try. But Tom, you may have to make a hard decision. If she's suffering—" "I know about letting go," Tom said, his voice thick. "But not today. Not her." When he reached the holding pens, they were already being torn down. The foal lay motionless, her breathing ragged, but her eyes were still open, still watching. And somehow, in that look, Tom saw not an ending, but a beginning. She was lying on her side in the corner of the pen, each breath a visible battle. But when Tom approached, the foal lifted her head ever so slightly. Those same deep, knowing eyes found his again. "Easy there, little one," he murmured, lowering himself beside her despite the fire in his knees. "You and me, we're going home." Getting her into the back of his old pickup wasn't easy. She was too weak to walk the ramp he'd borrowed, so Tom scooped her into his arms, cradling her frail body against his chest. Even in her emaciated state, the weight of a young horse tested every inch of strength left in his aging back. Sweat soaked through his shirt by the time he laid her gently on the blankets in the truck bed, the cool autumn air doing nothing to ease his effort. Dr. Sarah Wilkins pulled up in her vet truck, a box of hastily gathered supplies in the back. "I'll follow you to Sunrise," she called. "We need to begin treatment right away." The 15-minute drive felt like hours. Tom kept glancing in the mirror, catching brief, terrifying glimpses of her still body under the blankets. He didn't know why he'd done it, why he'd spent money he didn't have on an animal everyone else had already given up on. But Clara would have understood. She always had a soft spot for lost causes. The thought brought a quiet, aching smile to his face. Sunrise Ranch had seen better days. The once bright white of the old farmhouse had faded into a weathered gray, matching the overcast sky above. The barn, while still standing solid, had a sagging roof, and the driveway fence posts leaned like old men too tired to stand. The place was a shadow of what it had been when Morgan cattle were among the finest in the state. Tom backed the truck as close to the barn as he could. The foal hadn't moved. For a terrifying second, he thought she might be gone, but as he dropped the tailgate, a faint wheeze confirmed. She was still breathing. "Let's get her inside," Sarah said, already unloading gear. "I've got fluids, antibiotics, a nebulizer. We need to make a clean, warm space." Together, they prepared a stall with fresh straw and a heat lamp. Tom carried her again, this time gently lowering her onto the bedding. Under the bright barn lights, her condition looked even worse. Her coat was thin and patchy, bare skin raw and irritated. Crust had built up around her nostrils, and each breath rattled in her chest like broken glass. Sarah worked in silence, listening to her lungs and heart, checking her fever, assessing the damage. The deeper her frown grew, the more Tom braced himself. "It's bad, Tom," she finally said. "Severe pneumonia, parasites, extreme malnutrition. She's probably been fighting this for weeks without a single bit of treatment." She straightened, looking him in the eyes. "Her fever is dangerously high. I'm going to be honest. Most vets would recommend putting her down." Tom's jaw tightened. "But you're not most vets." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "No, I'm not. But I also can't promise a miracle. We can try aggressive treatment, round-the-clock care, special feeding, constant monitoring, but it'll be expensive. And even then, we still might lose her." Tom looked down at the foal. She was barely clinging on, but still watching them, alert, quiet, determined. There was something in her gaze that struck a chord deep inside him. "She deserves a chance," he said. "What do we do first?" For the next 3 hours, they worked side by side, starting IV fluids, administering antibiotics, setting up the nebulizer to ease her breathing. Tom absorbed every instruction, knowing that once Sarah left, it would be on him. "She'll need meds every 4 hours," Sarah said, packing up her supplies as the sun dipped low. "Nebulizer treatments twice a day. She needs to stay hydrated. If she won't drink, use this." She handed him a large syringe with a soft rubber tip. "Small sips often. Don't force it or she could aspirate." Tom nodded, already calculating how he'd juggle this new care routine around his ranch chores. With only the occasional help from Greg Martinez, the seasonal hand he could barely afford, the burden would fall entirely on him. Sarah paused at the stall door. "Have you thought of a name for her?" He hadn't, but as he looked at the little foal, her labored breaths, her quiet strength, one word came to him. "Solace," he said softly. Sarah smiled. "It suits her." She glanced around the aging barn, her expression turning serious. "Tom, I know things have been rough since Clara passed. This treatment, I'll manage," he cut in, the set of his jaw making it clear. The conversation was over. "I'll be back first thing tomorrow," Sarah said, finally relenting. "Call me if anything changes overnight." She paused before stepping out. "And Tom, try to get some rest. She's not the only one who needs to stay strong." After she left, Tom settled on a bale of hay near Solace's stall. His old border collie, Star, curled up at his feet, ever faithful. The familiar barn smells, hay, leather, the earthy presence of animals, usually brought him peace. But tonight, those scents mingled with disinfectant and medication, painting a new, unfamiliar picture of the life he was now fighting to preserve. "What do you think, girl?" he asked the dog, who tilted her head in response. "Did I lose my mind today?" Star didn't judge. She never had. Her quiet loyalty had carried him through the darkest nights after Clara's death, and tonight was no different. Tom glanced at his watch. 2 hours until Solace's next medication. He knew he should eat something, maybe even grab a quick shower, but instead he stayed where he was, watching her fragile body rise and fall with each breath. Each one felt like a small miracle. "You keep fighting," he whispered. "I'll do the same." Outside, the wind stirred, rattling a loose board on the barn roof he'd been meaning to fix for months. Tom pulled his jacket tight and leaned back. Whatever tomorrow brought for now, just for tonight, they had each other. And in the quiet of that shared struggle, they both found a moment of peace. A small solace in a world that had offered them so little. If this story moves you, hit that subscribe button. It means more than you know. And now, let's get back to it. That first night stretched on like forever. Tom set alarms on his old flip phone, dosing between treatments and meds, never sleeping more than 20 minutes at a time. But when dawn finally crept through the barn's dusty windows, Solace was still breathing. It wasn't much, but it felt monumental. Tom knelt beside her and gently ran a hand down her neck, careful of the IV line. Her breathing was still heavy, but to his ear the rattle didn't seem quite as harsh. "Still hanging in there, aren't you?" he murmured. "Stubborn little thing." Moments later, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the silence. Sarah was back, carrying a cooler and her medical kit. Her eyes moved instantly from Solace to Tom. "You look worse than she does," she said, setting her gear down. Tom just shrugged. "Slept enough." She didn't push the point. Instead, she got to work, checking Solace's vitals, listening to her lungs, feeling for fever. Her expression stayed neutral until she finished. "Her temperature's dropped 1/2 degree," she said. "It's not a breakthrough, but it's something. The nebulizer's helping. Her lungs still sound rough, but—" Tom let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "So, she's got a chance?" "She's fighting," Sarah said. "The next 72 hours are critical." She opened the cooler, revealing medication bottles and special feeding supplies. "I brought a formula that's easier for foals with pneumonia to digest. She can conserve energy while healing." As Sarah demonstrated the feeding method, Tom's phone rang. The screen flashed. Matthew's bank. He silenced it without answering. "Trouble?" Sarah asked, catching the gesture. "Nothing new," Tom said, turning back to Solace. "Just the usual reminder that running a ranch with your heart instead of your head comes at a price." She didn't speak for a moment, just watched him. Then gently, "Tom, I know it's not my place, but if you need help—" "I don't." His tone was quiet but final. She nodded, respecting the boundary, though her eyes said she wanted to say more. "I've got morning rounds. I'll be back later. Call me if anything changes." Once she was gone, Tom made his way slowly to the house. Star followed close behind, her paws light on the porch steps. Inside, the kitchen was a museum of Clara's life. Faded curtains, outdated appliances, her rooster figurines still lining the window. He hadn't touched a thing. Her handwritten recipes still lived in the drawer by the stove, just like she'd left them. He poured himself coffee, swallowed 2 aspirin for the ache settling into his back, then checked the blinking red light on the old answering machine. 3 messages, one from Ray Matthews at the bank, one from Maria at the feed store, gently reminding him of the overdue balance, and then one that made him stop cold. "Dad, it's Elijah. I got your letter. I'll be in Sage River next week on business. Maybe we could talk. Call me back at this number." Tom froze. For a moment, he just stood there, letting the words echo in the silence. 3 years of silence. 3 years of strained phone calls, unanswered letters, and the ache of a family torn apart. Their last conversation had ended in shouting, Elijah accusing him of pushing Clara too hard, Tom accusing his son of walking away from the ranch, from everything. Now he was coming back, and Tom didn't know whether to feel hope or fear. The letter Tom had sent a month earlier, an awkward, handwritten attempt to bridge 3 years of silence, was meant to mark his upcoming 60th birthday. He hadn't expected a response. He certainly hadn't expected Elijah to show up. Not now, not with Solace needing constant care and the ranch one step from collapse. He reached for the phone, then pulled his hand back. Later. He'd call later, when he knew what to say. Fortified with coffee and a hastily slapped-together sandwich, Tom made his way back to the barn for Solace's next treatment. But what he found stopped him cold. She was trying to stand. Her spindly legs shook violently under her tiny frame, and she only made it halfway before collapsing back onto the straw with a soft, frustrated whimper. "Whoa there, young lady," Tom said, rushing to her side. "You're getting ahead of yourself." But despite the fall, something lit up inside him. Hope. That attempt meant something. It meant strength. It meant she still had fight. As he administered the nebulizer, he kept talking to her. He rambled about the ranch, the weather, and the fence post down by the creek that refused to stay in place no matter how many nails he drove in. The one-sided conversation came surprisingly easy, like she understood every word. By afternoon, Solace had sipped water on her own for the first time. Another small victory. Sarah returned for her second visit of the day, and her usual guarded expression softened as she checked over the foal. "Keep doing exactly what you're doing," she told Tom. "Something about your presence. It calms her." The next 3 days became a blur. Tom barely left the barn. He slept in short bursts between treatments, letting the rest of the world fall away. Voicemails piled up. Bills remained unopened on the kitchen table. His world had narrowed to one small stall, where a quiet war between life and death was still being fought. On the 4th morning, Tom awoke to a sound he hadn't heard in years, a soft, curious nicker, and it wasn't coming from Thunder, his old quarter horse. Solace was standing, wobbly, fragile, but on her feet. She looked at him with those same soulful eyes that had stopped him cold back at the auction. "Well, look at you," he whispered, voice hoarse with sleep and awe. "Decided to join the land of the living, have you?" She stepped toward him, tentative, unsteady, but determined. When she reached the edge of the stall, she stretched out her delicate muzzle, breathing in his scent. Then, gently, she nudged his shoulder. The gesture was so familiar, so close to the way Clara's beloved mare used to greet her, that Tom had to look away. His throat tightened. "You're something else, you know that?" he murmured. When Sarah arrived that morning and saw Solace on her feet, the professional calm she usually wore gave way to genuine amazement. "I didn't expect this, not for at least another week," she said, shaking her head in wonder. Her will to survive is remarkable. After a full checkup, she added, "Her lungs are still compromised, but the antibiotics are working. I think this might be a real recovery." And word, of course, spread fast. That evening, Martha Davis from the diner dropped off a casserole. "So you don't burn your house down trying to cook," she joked, and Henry Williams, an old friend of Tom's father, stopped by with extra hay, just in case you're running low with all this excitement. Tom accepted the gestures with gruff nods, uncomfortable with the attention, but quietly grateful. It had been years since he'd let anyone pass the invisible wall he'd built around himself after Clara passed. Their return felt both awkward and healing. But the following morning brought a visitor he hadn't expected, Frank Peterson. Tom was mixing Solace's special feed when the sleek black pickup rolled into the driveway. Peterson stepped out, expensive boots already gathering dust on Tom's unpaved yard. "Morgan," he called out, striding toward the barn like he owned it. "Heard your little rescue project is beating the odds." Tom wiped his hands on his jeans, instantly guarded. Word travels fast. "Small town," Peterson replied, wearing a smile that didn't touch his eyes. He leaned over the stall door to get a better look at Solace, who had instinctively backed into the far corner. "Interesting coloring she's developing," he said, voice too casual. Almost looks like one of those Kiger Mustangs from the Steen Mountain herd. Tom didn't like the way he said it. She's just a regular foal, far as I know. Probably came from public lands. Someone neglected her, that's all. Peterson gave a vague hum and kept watching Solace with a little too much interest. Then he turned to Tom. Tell you what, Morgan, I admire what you've done, nursing her back from the brink and all. Must have cost a small fortune in vet bills. Let me take her off your hands. Say $5,000. 5 times what she'd be worth, even if she made a full recovery. The offer hung in the air. That $5,000 offer from Peterson, it would have covered Tom's overdue mortgage. It would have bought time with the bank, settled his tab at the feed store, and given him breathing room with every other creditor knocking on his door. It was, on paper, a lifeline, offered exactly when he needed it most. But when Tom looked at Solace, standing there with those soulful eyes watching everything in silence, he didn't see a debt. He saw something that had cracked open a part of his heart he thought was sealed shut. In just a few days, she had gone from a dying impulse buy to a living, breathing reminder that connection was still possible. She's not for sale, he said quietly, but with unshakable certainty. Peterson's expression tightened. Don't be foolish, Morgan. Everyone knows Sunrise Ranch is hanging by a thread. You can barely feed yourself, let alone a horse with medical needs. He stepped closer. $10,000. Final offer. Tom stood tall, met his eyes head on. I appreciate your concern for my finances, but my answer stands. Solace isn't going anywhere. Solace? Peterson scoffed. You actually named that worthless animal? She's worth more than your money, Tom replied, his voice calm but iron-solid. Good day, Peterson. The color rose in Peterson's face, unaccustomed to hearing no. You'll regret this, Morgan. That pride of yours is what ran this ranch into the ground. Your father would be ashamed of what it's become. The words hit like a punch, but Tom didn't flinch. I believe you know the way out. When the truck finally disappeared down the road, Tom leaned against the stall door, his heart racing, equal parts anger and something else, a fierce protectiveness. Peterson's interest in Solace didn't make sense. With his money, he could buy any young horse in the region. So why this one? Why now? Solace seemed to sense his unrest. She approached quietly and nudged his hand, her touch light and comforting. Don't worry, Tom whispered, stroking her neck. That man's not taking you anywhere. Later that afternoon, Sarah arrived for her scheduled checkup, but this time she brought someone with her. A young girl lingered by the truck, hesitant. Hope you don't mind, Sarah said, waving the girl forward. This is my niece Lucy. She's staying with me while her parents are out of town. She's been dying to meet the miracle foal everyone's talking about. Tom hesitated. It had been a long time since he'd had a child around the ranch, but after a pause, he gave a small nod. Lucy approached with the gentle instinct of someone who understood animals. Her movements were quiet, respectful. To Tom's surprise, Solace responded right away, stretching her neck toward the girl with cautious curiosity. She's beautiful, Lucy whispered, holding out her palm for the foal to sniff. Her eyes, they look so wise. They do, don't they? Tom murmured, watching the moment unfold. It was the first time someone else had said out loud what he'd felt since the beginning. While Sarah examined Solace, Lucy asked thoughtful questions about her care, and Tom, normally reserved, found himself answering every one, step by step, explaining the treatment routine, the feed, the meds, and realizing it felt good to share it. Her breathing sounds clearer, Sarah said, finally straightening, and she's already gained a few pounds. I think it's time she got some sun. A little fresh air will do her good, just nothing too strenuous yet. I cleared a small paddock behind the barn, Tom said. Soft ground, fully fenced, safe. Sarah smiled. Perfect. She glanced at her watch. We've got to run, Lucy. Say goodbye for now. The girl gently stroked Solace's forehead. Can I come back sometime? I could help with her care. I've been reading about horses. Tom opened his mouth, but Sarah jumped in. We'll talk about it later. Solace needs her rest now. After they left, Tom prepared for Solace's first steps outside. He fashioned a halter from soft rope, light enough not to rub her healing skin, but secure enough to guide her. "Ready for a new adventure?" he asked softly, slipping it on. Solace didn't resist. The early afternoon sun painted the ranch in gold as Tom led her through the barn doors. She blinked at the light, hesitating for just a moment, then took a long breath and stepped forward, and then another, and another. Her steps were uncertain at first, but she moved with quiet determination. In the paddock, she began to explore, each step stronger than the last. When she reached a patch of grass, she dipped her head and nibbled, her first natural feeding since arriving. Tom leaned on the fence, watching in silence, a deep calm settling over him. She still had a long road ahead, but for the first time he believed in her complete recovery. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the ranch, Tom noticed dust rising from the road. A car, one he didn't recognize, crept down the driveway and stopped beside his old truck. He squinted into the fading light. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Elijah Morgan, 3 years gone, and suddenly here in the flesh. Taller, dressed in clean city clothes, his careful haircut and pressed shirt clashing sharply with the dust and denim of Sunrise Ranch. Father and son faced each other in silence. 2 men, 3 years of silence, one stall between them. The silence between father and son hung heavy until Elijah finally spoke. "Dad, I got your message." Tom nodded, throat dry. "Didn't expect you so soon." "I had business nearby," Elijah replied, his eyes drifting to Solace, who watched him with calm curiosity. "This must be the foal Martha mentioned at the diner." Tom grimaced. Small-town gossip hadn't changed. "She said you were working miracles," Elijah added with a faint smile. "Hardly," Tom muttered. "Just basic care and medicine." Elijah stepped closer to the fence, keeping his distance. "She looks better than I expected." "She's a fighter," Tom said, his voice laced with pride. He stopped short of saying who she reminded him of, but Elijah understood. Mom would have done the same, helped something everyone else gave up on. That simple truth created a flicker of connection between them. "You staying long?" Tom asked. "A few days, maybe a week." "I'm at the River Inn." Before Tom could respond, Solace approached Elijah, sniffing curiously. "She's friendly," Elijah said. "With people who deserve it," Tom replied, less sharp than it would have been 3 years ago. As Solace gently nudged Elijah's hand, something unspoken passed between father and son. Not forgiveness, but a first step toward it. Over the next week, they danced around the past with careful politeness, their conversations limited to Solace, the weather, and local news. Deeper wounds remained untouched. Meanwhile, Solace improved rapidly, her coat now sleek, her strength returning. Sarah approved longer outdoor sessions, and each morning she greeted Tom at the gate with a soft nudge that had become their ritual. One day, Elijah joined Tom at the fence, offering a mug of coffee. "She's not the same horse you pulled from that auction," he said. "She's got something in her that doesn't know how to quit," Tom replied, smiling. Elijah hesitated. "Have you thought about what's next, once she's fully recovered?" Tom hadn't. He'd been too focused on surviving each day. "She stays," he said. "This is her home." Elijah gently pushed further. "Dad, I've looked at the numbers. The ranch is worse off than I thought. Property taxes alone." "I didn't ask you to look at the accounts," Tom cut in. "Someone had to," Elijah said. "The bank's threatening foreclosure. You've ignored their letters for months." Tom faced him. "This ranch has survived hard times before. We'll manage." "Not like this," Elijah replied. "Not without change." He listed the realities: cattle barely breaking even, outdated equipment, and now a horse requiring specialized care. His words stung because they were true, and Tom knew it. The same emotional choices he'd once blamed Elijah for were now his own. Before Tom could respond to Elijah's suggestion about the ranch's future, Sarah's truck pulled into the driveway unexpectedly. She wasn't due until the afternoon, and her urgency triggered concern. "I need to show you something," she said, leading them to Solace's paddock. There, she revealed new test results, genetic markers and coat patterns that strongly indicated Solace was a rare descendant of the legendary ghost herd, a bloodline thought extinct for decades. Elijah quickly realized this could explain Peterson's obsession. Sarah confirmed that such genetics would be invaluable to any breeding program, especially to someone like Peterson, who had tried for years to recreate those traits artificially. Just then, Becky Taylor arrived, an experienced horsewoman and old friend. When introduced to Solace, she immediately recognized the rare markings. Tom trusted her enough to share what they'd discovered, and she warned them. Peterson wouldn't let this go easily. Moments later, his black pickup appeared again, this time with backup: his son Jake, a lawyer, and an offer of $50,000 for Solace. Enough to save the ranch, but Tom refused, even as Peterson's threats grew more aggressive, implying legal action and even false accusations of animal neglect. Sarah arrived just in time to shut those threats down, presenting thorough documentation of Solace's treatment. Peterson's plan unraveled on the spot, but he made one thing clear before leaving: he wasn't done. As the dust settled, Elijah stood firmly by Tom's side, signaling he was now fully committed to protecting both his father and Solace. Later, Becky reminded Tom he didn't have to fight this alone. Watching Elijah help her lead Solace, Tom realized the foal hadn't just rekindled hope. She was helping rebuild the bridge between him and his son. The next morning, Elijah suggested a bold new idea. Instead of selling Solace or just keeping the ranch afloat, what if they built something new, preserving and developing the ghost herd legacy right here at Sunrise Ranch? Before Tom could answer, Becky arrived for Solace's first groundwork session, joined by her teenage son and Lucy Wilkins. Tom, surprisingly, welcomed them all. Solace's gentle, curious response to training amazed everyone. Even Elijah rolled up his sleeves and joined in. But the peaceful morning was shattered by distressed cattle calls. They discovered someone had deliberately cut the fence. Peterson's aggressive bulls had been released into Tom's pasture. It was Sabotage. As panic spread through the herd, Elijah took charge like a seasoned rancher, Becky assisting. But when one massive bull charged Tom, his age left him vulnerable. In that terrifying moment, Solace broke free, inserting herself between Tom and the bull, guiding it away with uncanny precision. She'd never been trained for cattle. Her instinct came from something deeper, something inherited. Her movements were flawless, as if born to the task. Sheriff Daniels arrived to witness the aftermath and confirm the fence had been intentionally cut. While there wasn't enough proof to charge Peterson, the report would be filed. Later, Henry Williams, Tom's father's old friend, confirmed what they'd all suspected. Solace was the real deal, a living legacy of a bloodline that once defined the American West. That night, Elijah and Tom talked openly for the first time. Elijah suggested they not only fight Peterson, but turn Solace's story into the foundation for a new future. As word of her bravery spread, neighbors rallied to repair fences. Even a local reporter showed up. Tom, once private and guarded, told the man to speak with Elijah. His son had witnessed everything, and more importantly, was now part of the future. That day, for the first time in years, Tom saw more than just struggle ahead. He saw purpose, possibility, and a chance to rebuild, side by side with the son he thought he'd lost, and the horse no one expected to survive. Over the past month, several cutting incidents had occurred on properties that had refused Peterson's offers, something Tom took in with grim recognition. There was no direct evidence tying Peterson to the attacks, but the pattern was becoming clear. The sheriff confirmed he'd forwarded the findings to the county prosecutor, but there was more. Peterson had filed for an emergency hearing, requesting court-ordered genetic testing of Solace, claiming she might carry rare ghost herd DNA. If approved, Solace could be taken into temporary custody for analysis at Peterson's facility. Tom was stunned, but Elijah, now acting as legal counsel, was already preparing arguments to block the move. Sarah brought in Dr. Marcus Campbell, a geneticist, who confirmed that Solace may be the purest descendant of the ghost herd in decades. Tom reluctantly agreed to allow independent testing, but only on the condition that Solace remained on his property. They needed evidence to stop Peterson's legal push. Meanwhile, the community rallied. Neighbors showed up, outraged by Peterson's tactics. Michael, the local reporter, framed the case as David versus Goliath. Dr. Campbell's findings, paired with Solace's remarkable recovery and instinctive skills, began to turn the tide. At the courthouse, Elijah presented a powerful defense, backed by expert testimony. Solace wasn't just a genetic anomaly. She was thriving under Tom's care. Peterson's claims that she needed a controlled facility fell apart when Dr. Campbell described her progress and abilities. Sarah's testimony reinforced that removing Solace would harm her recovery. Finally, Judge Reynolds ruled. Solace would stay with Tom. The court denied Peterson's request and issued a protective order. It was a major victory, but Tom knew the battle wasn't over. Back at Sunrise Ranch, Tom and Elijah prepared for the next challenge, proving Solace's worth through her natural instincts. At the county fair, she stunned the crowd with her innate ability to work cattle, despite no formal training. Media coverage exploded. The demonstration not only validated her heritage, but proved she was more than a specimen. She was a living legacy. Peterson returned one last time, offering $200,000. Tom refused. Solace wasn't for sale. Her value wasn't in profit, but in what she represented. The Western Heritage Foundation approved a grant to preserve Solace's bloodline and support the ranch. Elijah decided to stay and help build a long-term program for heritage preservation, turning Sunrise Ranch into a center for cultural conservation. In saving one rejected foal, Tom had saved his ranch, reconnected with his son, and sparked a movement to protect something far greater, a way of life worth defending.